Thanks to years of fanciful children's books and Hollywood family movies, you might think of fairies as cute, whimsical little winged creatures, flying through fields of flowers and casting spells with tiny little magic wands. But this is actually a far cry from the fairies of Irish myth, where the fairies were in fact the original inhabitants of Ireland, driven into hiding underground by the invading warrior tribe, the Celts. There, they used their innate magic to become the Sidhe, otherwise known as the wee folk, or fairies. In many Irish tales, fairies continued to live much as before, forming communities where they would farm during the day and party at night. In some tales, humans could interact with fairies and have fairly pleasant experiences, sometimes being invited into their fairy world or transported by their magic to other parts of the earth. But more often, the tales would warn humans not to draw the fairies' attention, for they were also known to bring bad luck, and in some cases even kidnap humans, sometimes using them as servants. Even today, though the number of people who have said they have seen or interacted with fairies has significantly decreased, farmers and landowners in Ireland still often take care to plow and mow around stone circles, standing stones, and what are known as fairy forts, the remains of medieval ring forts, so as not to incur the wrath of the wee folk. Many proposed industrial and residential construction projects have fallen apart due to concerns they might upset sacred sites and monuments associated with fairies. As recently as 1999, an in-progress new motorway was actually rerouted so as to avoid disturbing what the local residents flagged as a fairy tree. If the people of Ireland are, then, so protective of the fairies and the legends still surrounding them, one can't help but wonder why they didn't also rise up in unity to protest the big-budget, big-studio adaptation of a popular kids' book series, a movie that not only plays fast and loose with fairy mythology, but is arguably even more disrespectful in how it treats its own source material. Perhaps it was only the fact that one of their own, one of the great Irish actors and directors of all time, was behind the camera for this movie that prevented the wrath of the Irish people, and maybe even the fairies themselves. The year is 2020, and in the midst of a global pandemic, while Disney Pictures are ready to give millions stuck at home some entertaining relief, and hopefully, in the process, launch the next big family adventure cinematic franchise with Artemis Fowl. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris, here to discuss if art is a miss or a foul or a home run. I don't know baseball.
I congratulate you on that, though. Until you got into home run, and then there was nothing, there was no connection anymore. But,
No.
Yeah. Well, this is the culmination of our summer surprise series. Mm-hmm. This is the series, of course, where we allow a computer randomizer to choose which movies we were going to look at this summer. And it's been a real mixed bag, I'd say, this summer. Thankfully, we had Jake Gyllenhaal in there mixing it up a little bit, but still, like, overall, summer surprise, as is usually the case. You know, we do this because we have certain movies that are on the list, but I'd say you and I are not really chomping at the bit to get to.
Sure,
you know?
Sure.
And we might never get to them on our own volition if we don't let the computer choose them for us. And I'd say, for reasons we're going to talk about, today's movie probably falls into that realm. You and I have a little bit of a history with this one, and I don't think we were necessarily excited about returning to it. But that is the 2020 Disney film, Artemis Fowl. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about this film?
For sure. It is directed by Kenneth Branagh, a famous actor, directed a bunch of Shakespearean adaptations, led the charge in the beginnings of the MCU with Thor, also led the charge with all these god-awful remakes with Cinderella. This one was written by Hamish McCall. He wrote Johnny English Reborn and The Beloved Paddington. And then Connor McPherson. He also wrote, and I do not know anything he has made. His credits are meaningless to me. This is based on the 11-book series by, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Trev, Ian Colfer?
Yeah, sure.
It's one of those Irish names, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
Ian or Ian, I don't know, but it's Eoin.
Yes. So any Irish listeners, tweet us your thoughts. The budget of this film is $125 million. And for the first time in failure to franchise history, we have 0 box office dollars. And you're probably asking, yeah, like, why? What happened? It's an ultimate failure. Well, listeners, this was one of the first Disney Plus straight to streaming premieres. It was delayed because of the COVID-19 pandemic and was released exclusively on the streaming service. So there is no way of seeing if this movie made any money. So there you go.
And let's just say it now, Chris. Let's get out of the way our personal history with this. As you said, it was one of the first COVID delayed films, and then just put onto a streaming service to kind of keep the masses entertained while we were all locked down in our homes during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. And, not too far into the pandemic, you and I and a few other friends decided that we were all feeling, I'm sure like everyone, a little, stir crazy, cooped up, wanted to talk, wanted to see each other. So we all decided to hop on Zoom once a week and watch a movie together. We would all pick a movie, all get it up on our various streaming services, press play at the same time, and watch the movie while also looking down at each other's faces. But correct me if I'm wrong. I think, was this the first one we did? Was Artemis Fowl the one that started it for us, or no? I know it was an early one.
You know what? Let me check right now because
you got the list, right?
I log everything on Letterboxd. Check your podcast app, and you can follow both of us on Letterboxd. But when I do, I put a tag for quarantine movie night. No, this one was actually way into the list.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, we did lots. Can I give a little history lesson, or can I tell the listeners what we started to watch with?
Yeah, why not? Because we might as well set the context for this.
Yeah.
So.
Memory lane. So we actually started our quarantine movie nights with The Fanatic, John Travolta movie. Film. Yeah. So then we went on a run. We did The Velocipaster, The Hurricane Heist, Poseidon Rex, Dead Trigger. Then we watched Die Another Day. We started to move into like real movies again.
My memory of this is that some of us were fine with doing shitty movie night, and then I believe it was actually you who said, "Guys, I can't keep watching just these shitty movies. Can we move into some good stuff?"
Yes. But then we followed that up with, you guys made me rewatch The Rise of Skywalker. Wasn't happy about that. And then you made me rewatch Transformers: The Last Night.
One of the best Transformers films. You're welcome.
Okay, all right, cool it. And then we watched Tooken.
The Taken parody, yes.
And then we were on a parody kick, so we watched Not Another Teen Movie. And then we went on to The Cable Guy, Dirty Work, and then we got to Artemis Fowl. On June 16th, we watched that. That's so funny.
A lot of important moments in there. Remember that, like, Not Another Teen Movie? That was where I realized I actually liked that movie after years of thinking I didn't.
Yeah, same. Cool.
So there was a lot of ups and downs there, but we did get to Artemis Fowl, and so I think the Artemis Fowl thing was, again, I think we all just had a feeling like this is probably going to be junk, but because it was like the hyped new streaming movie that week, I think we just thought it'd be funny to check it out because and we'll talk more about this obviously, but like the reviews weren't so hot right when it debuted.
No.
And there was also already some talk about it having kind of a long, torturous, process to get to the screen, which we can kind of head into now. But yeah, I just want to set that context. When I say that this was, we have history with this, that's the history, is that this was, during our, we have watched this before during our quarantine days.
Yes. Hey, I guess before we talk about the behind the scenes of the actual movie, I did want to ask you, because you moonlight at a bookstore every once in a while. And this is a 11 book series, and it's quite large, I guess, within the YA circles. I gotta ask you, did this IP cross your path like before or after? Like what's your history with it on that side?
Yeah, I mean, I never read them, but this is one of those ones. I think you ask me this every time we do one of these adaptations, and this answer always kind of varies to different degrees. But this is one where it was definitely on my radar at a time. I think by the time this movie came along, and even since the movie, I don't think this series is as big as it was. It's like we still have them in the store, but It's not like flying off the shelf anymore. But in like earlier days of my bookstore career, I definitely remember a time when this series was very, very popular and selling quite a bit. So, all I knew about it, and this will go into our discussion of like the film and like the road to the screen. All I really knew about the series from working in the store was, I mean, obviously I saw the covers, and the covers were always like Artemis, like which was you could tell was a young kid in a suit and sunglasses.
Yeah.
But all I kind of knew from like hearing people talk about it vaguely when they'd come in to buy it, or maybe glancing at the back of some books, was it was a YA series about a kid who's a supervillain.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of all I knew. It's like, oh, this is a book that's actually like the hero is a bad guy. We were like rooting for the bad guy. And you know, normally that sounds like something that would kind of intrigue me, but I don't know. It's just not really one I ever got into. It might be because the only Ian Colfer book I ever read was I'm a huge fan of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you know, he wrote 4 of those and was working on a 5th when he passed away. And then Ian Colfer was actually given the rights by the family to write a new Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy book.
Oh.
And it was not good. It wasn't horrible, but Douglas Adams has a very particular comedic voice that's very hard to replicate, I think. And honestly, I think the only person who should have even attempted to do that book was probably Neil Gaiman, who's like a huge Douglas Adams fan, and I think they were friends. He should have been the one to do it, I think, but he did not, and then they gave it to Ian Colfer. And I'm guessing they give it to Ian Colfer off of Artemis Fowl. That would be my guess.
Okay.
But yeah, I read that book and wasn't a huge fan, so I was never like keen to like circle back to anything else he wrote, which might be unfair, obviously, because that's, you know, I don't blame him for not being able to write as good as Douglas Adams.
Yeah.
But still, just so I was like, yeah, I know this book's about like a teenage supervillain or whatever, but I never got into it. Long-winded answer, sorry, but that's the answer.
Well, that's your style.
That's my thing.
That's your thing. Actually, I had to edit that down, listeners. But it's funny because we talk about movies all the time when they try to replicate something, and there's always, especially action movies, and the taglines or critics like to call it "Die Hard in a something," "Die Hard in a plane," "Die Hard in a building," that sort of thing. But with these books, they actually started to sum up the books as "Die Hard with Fairies." Interesting enough, especially since we've seen the film. I guess Colfer thought that was apt. He liked that idea because it was almost like a Hans Gruber type of a like situation. Like you're following on, like you said, the supervillain. Like that's the whole idea of this book. Like let's give a little bit of logline here. You know, it's about a 12-year-old child prodigy named Artemis Fowl, the second actually, and him and his bodyguard in the first book kidnap an elf. Like an elf captain, I think. Like she's like on the magical police force, and it's all about holding her ransom to then exploit and restore his family's fortune. So, I guess the book series is really about this kid who's a criminal mastermind, who's very cold and cynical and kind of an asshole, grow into somebody with feelings and more of a profound moral compass. That's the whole idea of the books. So I guess that is interesting in itself, you know, like rarely do you get the villain stories, and especially when it sounds like he's a pretty big asshole in the book, you know, like there's all these like Sony Spider-Man adjacent movies that have been coming out, you know, like these villain movies, and they almost want to make them an anti-hero right off the bat, and it's just very odd. Like you don't really get that they're a villain, but it sounds like in this book series, absolutely Artemis Fowl is the antagonist, 100%.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Like I said, on his face, it is interesting to have a series titled Artemis Fowl, but at least for the first few books, he's the antagonist. The protagonist is this elf, Holly Short, Captain Holly Short.
Yeah.
And she, or fairy, elf, whatever, but she's like the hero of the actual books. And then as the series goes along, they become friends, and he starts to, you know, have a change of heart. And like, yeah, like I don't know. I wonder, having not read them, I don't know at which point that happens in this series, but still, to have the patience to be like, I'm going to do like an 11-book character redemption arc for a villain in like a young reader middle grade series. That's pretty cool. I have to hand it to them for that.
So the film adaptation, though, you know, it's so crazy because this movie comes out in 2020, right?
Yeah.
And you had already mentioned, you know, there was kind of there's a long history of the behind the scenes and why it's taken so long. And it goes back to 2001. Miramax had the rights to the film with Lawrence Guterman signed to direct. Now, he's prolific, Trev. He directed Cats and Dogs, which I saw in theaters with my mom. And
hot take, I kind of like that movie.
Same here. I like animals that talk. And guess what? We both haven't seen Strays.
No.
But that is an
There's probably
R-rated.
limits to that, yeah.
Yes, there's limits. Like, that's one that I will probably catch later on, but am I going to the theater to watch Strays? Probably not. But he made Cats and Dogs, and then he made Son of the Mask, which, by most accounts on the planet, is like one of the absolute worst sequels of all time. I have never seen that. Have you seen it?
No, and I never will.
No, never. We wouldn't even watch that in our movie nights.
Yeah.
It's a bridge too far. But again, 2001, that's happening. And then flash forward 2 years after that, and Colfer, the original author of the books, says, the screenplay is being finalized and we're going into pre-production. Well, he lied. Because the movie is in development hell until 2011, where Saoirse Ronan is attached to portray Holly Short. She's a big get, especially now. Maybe not in 2011.
Yeah, in 2011 she wasn't, but they could have been one of the early Saoirse Ronan movies. They missed out.
Totally. Didn't happen. Let's go to 2013. Now, this is where Walt Disney comes into play. Not the man, but the studio. Not his frozen head. It didn't rear up like in our Haunted Mansion episode. We're talking about that, but they decide they're going to be doing the Artemis Fowl movie themselves. It's going to cover the first 2 books. They then go to the Weinstein Company and
Speaking of supervillains.
Yeah.
Although with no redemption arc.
Yes, exactly. And they're going to joint produce this film with Robert De Niro in a producerial role. That was interesting. 2015, Kenneth Branagh is hired. And then a couple years later, guess what? You just named him. Harvey Weinstein starts touching people. Well, didn't start. Got caught. Yeah. Got caught for being an absolute monster. So Disney removes him entirely from the production, removes the Weinstein Company. It's over. We're going to do it ourselves. We'll do it live, as they say. And flash forward to 2019, where they delay it again to the middle of 2020. And, this is just nonsense, hey? This is just, especially for the movie that we saw. You know what I mean? We're going to get into what we saw and how this movie felt at the time and now. But, get it together, Yeah,
this is the exact opposite of the term striking when the iron is hot. This is the opposite of that. You figure because like I said, the rights for this were originally purchased before the series had even come out. It was just people had pre-read the first book and knew this was going to be a big hit, and by I said, by the time we get to the release of this, and I'm only speaking, I'm no expert on this. I don't know the exact sales numbers, so I'm just going off of what I see working in a bookstore. Yeah. But by the time you get to 2019, 2020, the heat is not the same on this series. No. Too much time had definitely passed, and then you said for what we saw, to consider that all that time was spent working on this. We'll have more to say about that. But
yeah, 20 years. That's the thing, guys, listeners. I just spitfired 20 years of getting this movie off the ground, and to put $125 million into that, as well as just everybody's time,
and not insubstantial talent either. You said Saoirse Ronan being attached, eventually getting Kenneth Branagh, Robert De Niro producing at one point, and then you even end up with some pretty heavy hitters in the cast. When it finally does roll, you have Judi Dench and Colin Farrell. So. Yeah, I don't know.
I thought you were going to mention heavy hitters as Josh Gad. I know you love Josh Gad.
Oh, don't worry. I have stuff to say about Josh Gad. This movie.
So yeah, this is a movie that it's easy to just kind of breeze through what they did because they didn't really do anything for 20 years getting this movie off the ground. And then unfortunately the pandemic happened. You couldn't predict that, but dumping it on the streaming service is definitely a choice. That's like a Hail Mary at that point.
Yeah, and I think there's been some of these decisions that I've agreed with and some I haven't. Probably the majority I haven't. This idea to put them onto streaming directly first. Mm-hmm. This one probably saved them some face, though, don't you think? Because this movie would have fallen on its face in the theaters. So they were able to at least act like it was some kind of big deal, putting one of their big movies on streaming, and giving it a little bit of hype that way. This would have been a surefire. We'd still be doing this movie if it had been in theaters instead of on Disney Plus.
Definitely. Yeah. Do you just want to get into it?
Yeah, let's.
We want to know everything about the man you work for.
A man
This isn't about the father. This is about the son, Artemis Fowl. You've grown strong, son. And smarter than I ever imagined.
Then take me with you.
You're all I have now, Artie. There's just one very important thing I have to do.
Authorities launched a worldwide manhunt for the famous collector. He is suspected to have been behind some of the biggest robberies ever.
Dad. Hello?
Your family has taken something of great value from us. Return it to me, or I will destroy everything you love.
You weren't supposed to see this yet. Your father is in a complicated profession. For years, he has protected powerful secrets that have kept mankind safe from the dangers of another world. It's time to face your destiny.
Now look around, this is what they call greatness.
But we are not alone in this.
Mulch Diggum's just a talented giant dwarf.
And I'm Holly Short, your ally on the other side. It's real. All right. Save my father. Save the world.
Whole team ready, tell them we on deck.
Scared, Artemis?
I prefer scared to dead.
An army is coming.
You think you can beat us?
We'll see.
Who do you think you are?
I'm the next criminal mastermind.
Now look around, this is what they call greatness.
I didn't read much on trolls. Anything I should look out for?
The teeth.
They eat people. Good to know.
All right, Trev, you ready for this plot?
Yep.
Okay.
Born ready.
Okay, here we go. Artemis Fowl, a young criminal prodigy, hunts down a secret society of fairies to find his missing father.
Sure. Good enough. That sounds like the movie we saw years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, Chris, do you mind if I go first on this one?
Of course, go ahead.
All right. Well, actually, I have to be honest. I did not rewatch this movie.
Okay. Yeah.
We watched it back in 2020. I know. I was, wanted to have my thoughts fresh. Wanted to come in as really prepared. But yeah, I didn't watch it. Sorry.
Well, this is going to be a first for F2F listeners and us. I actually didn't watch it either.
Oh. Well, I guess we both failed. Well.
Yeah.
Sorry. See you next time, folks.
Yeah, rate, review, whatever you do, like and subscribe, and all that other shit I say at the end of these episodes.
Well, no.
Yeah.
Let's let the cat out of the bag. There is a reason we didn't rewatch this movie, and this is the summer surprise. Talk about a surprise.
Oh, fuck.
This one came up in our summer surprise randomizer. You and I both died a little bit inside, thinking we had to watch Artemis Fowl again, and then while summer surprise is going. On May 26th, 2023, Disney Plus removes Artemis Fowl from its streaming service before you and I have a chance to revisit it as part of their the ongoing cost-cutting measures of not just them but other streaming platforms. Lately, have been taking down streaming exclusive product to save on residual costs, so they're getting these tax breaks by removing these movies and TV shows, and that happened before we had a chance to rewatch it. So and you'd say, okay, well, why didn't you just go rent it digitally? Nope, it's not available there either. Can't rent this movie. Can't watch on Disney Plus. This movie effectively no longer exists.
No.
And we had an emergency meeting when I discovered that. And said, what do? Do we call an audible? And we decided, no, let's instead use this opportunity to talk about some stuff related to that decision to remove from the streaming services. But I think both of us, we can at least start by giving a general sense of what we remember about the film and what we think. So I'll still go first, Chris, and say, this movie sucks.
Yeah.
That's what I remember. The movie is bad.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to say it's so bad that it deserves to be obliterated from existence. I don't think that's true of any movie. But this movie is a huge miss. Even the plot description you just read is not accurate because one thing we should definitely get out of the way is this is a movie that over that 20-year pre-production period clearly went through probably a lot of different script drafts and changes, and by the time it got to the screen, and this was the general consensus from the fandom when it did come out and why it got some bad reviews, it barely resembled that book series we talked about. Artemis Fowl, the main character, is not a criminal mastermind. He's just a really smart kid. There's like no sense of him being a supervillain or a criminal. So the entire like cool hook that we discussed, this long arc of a supervillain becoming a hero, nope, he's a hero from the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's just like, and you know, I know we're not going to talk about the movie too much, but that's like just indicative of like the overall problems of this movie. I don't know. I barely remember it, to be honest. You know, I went on Wikipedia today and read the plot description since we weren't able to rewatch it. And then I watched the pitch meeting from Ryan George on YouTube. And I have to admit, I was like, that happened? What? And this is only like 3 years ago we watched it. And I was like, I don't remember most of this. And that's the problem. It's one of those movies that's just entirely forgettable because it's just everything about bland kids blockbuster fare. You know,
Yeah.
that's what I remember. It wasn't even like fun bad. I think we were all just like miserable bad watching it.
Yeah. This is a review from Patrick Willems. We're both a fan of him. And he has a diary entry here on Letterboxd. Ireland should prosecute Kenneth Branagh for war crimes. And he gave it the same star rating I gave it, 1 star. This movie was a atrocious, forgettable piece of shit when we watched it. Usually when we watch these movies, I had a tendency of drinking heavily while watching him, and I think I had maybe 14 whiskeys watching this movie, and so maybe that.
What's interesting is I had never drank in my life until I watched this movie. I was a teetotaler. This movie made me an alcoholic.
Exactly. And yeah, not only is it forgettable just purely because of my mental state while watching it, but I thought for sure, I mean, something was going to be jogged in my memory, right? So I went back and I watched that same pitch meeting, and I watched the trailer that I dropped earlier for you listeners, and no, I couldn't remember anything. The trailer did nothing. I was like, oh my God, like I can't believe we even watched this. But I do remember being just bored, you know? It was just bored and unfun, you know, just like the opposite of fun.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, we've watched other movies for this show where we're like, oh, it's bad, but like I don't regret watching it because it was fun, you know? Or like a movie like I wasn't a huge fan of. I'm trying to think of a great example. Like Prince of Persia, right? I wasn't super into that movie, but it felt like a movie. You know, I think that's what I'm talking about. I was like, oh, this actually was kind of nice in the middle of summer surprise that, you know, I wasn't a huge fan, but had some like kind of big spectacle to it, had some likable performances. Artemis Fowl, I just remember watching the entire thing. It just felt like you're watching static on screen. You know, CGI was bad. Action scenes obviously were not memorable enough for me to remember. That's redundant. But I think like the kid actors weren't great. I'm not going to harp on that too much. You know,
the only thing I really remember was the moment I think we lost our minds watching was Josh Gad's in the film, and he narrates. I think he bookends the film if I remember correctly, but he narrates it. And I'm just gonna say this out of the way. Like, I'm gonna get this out of the way. I despise Josh Gad. Josh Gad like shows up in movies, and I'm immediately turned off by it. He's like an annoying theater bro. You know what I mean? Does that make sense to you? Okay.
Yeah.
I can't stand him. But he plays a character called Mulch Duggams, who's doing like this really bad like Batman voice. But there's a moment where, and I'll drop the clip here.
Dwarfis giganticus. Dwarfis giganticus.
Everybody, stand back.
It's feeding time. Amen.
In that clip, listeners, he unhinges his jaw and he dives headfirst into the dirt to dig under and to go into the mansion. And he's digging so much and eating the dirt that it's flying out of his rectum.
Yeah. Yeah, I do remember that. That's the moment I remember because
the only
I
one.
think that was the moment where we all were like, "What is happening?" You know.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's really horrible. And I'm with you in like not being a huge fan of Josh Gad, but at least if the whole movie was full of stuff like that, we would probably remember the movie more. So you kind of like got to give it up to that scene for at least being like so bizarre. You know, like. It's almost like a Disney's version of a John Waters movie for a second. But
funny.
yeah, the rest is just a big pile of nothing. And so I don't feel too bad just telling people like, normally the whole point of the show is we talk about whether, we think the movie is actually kind of a hidden gem, even though it failed and worth rediscovery, or whether it deserved to fail. And ultimately that leads to us telling listeners whether we think they should check it out or not. Well, you can't check this out.
No.
And we don't know if that's going to change. At this point, still, we're kind of early in this whole move to just eliminate things from streaming services for tax write-offs and for, increased profit on their ends. But yeah, like whether they'll eventually put this back up or whether they'll do a physical release or sell it to another streaming service, we don't know. And that's part of what we want to talk about today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the industry, this is an industry that obviously me and you are extremely passionate about. Yeah. Like we live, eat, and breathe the film industry. It is something that we love doing and being part of, either from the sidelines or have been lucky enough to be included in certain productions of things in the past. And we know people in the industry, and
Are you talking about how my voice is in Tron Legacy?
Is your voice in Tron Legacy?
Yeah, I was at Comic-Con the year they had us all record with the Hall H. They had us all chant Rinsler, Rinsler, and apparently that's when he shows up in the movie. That's us chanting.
I was a production assistant on the spin-off or network redo of Masters of Horror called Fear Itself.
Oh, Fear Itself, really? Oh, you've never told me this.
No, I've never told you this, really.
Yeah.
Fear Itself filmed in my hometown in Edmonton.
Oh,
Canada.
believe me, I know it showed. It looked like it filmed in Canada.
Yeah, and my best friend is an extra in a couple of the episodes.
Do you remember which episode you worked on, and which director it was?
The one I was in, they actually filmed at one of my best friend's homes. With the one with Brandon Routh. And the what's her name, who directed American Psycho?
Oh, Mary Herron.
Mary Herron.
Yeah.
So I was on set for them. I just went to visit that set when they were filming. I didn't actually work on that one, but I saw Mary Herron, I saw Brandon Routh, I met them, and then I was very interested. Right, like I was by Video Village, and I started to just ask questions, and I was like, how do I get in on this? Like this is my thing. This is my gig.
And Brandon Routh told you, be really tall, good looking, and muscular.
I know, and I'm one out of 3 of those, and you get to decide. But they, some guy gave me a card and was like, hey, call me on this day. And then I called him and I sent in my resume. I went for an interview, and yeah, I was on. Oh man, you're gonna test my thing here, but I was. Oh, hold on. I was the one with Anna Kendrick because I actually met her. I met Anna Kendrick. It was like a witchy one. Mm-hmm. And I remember her and a couple of the other actors were standing outside waiting for them to get the camera ready. Obviously, like there's so much planning involved. That's the one thing I learned at a young age was film sets are boring, and it takes forever to get things ready. But we stood out in front of this house and just like shot the shit for a while. I worked on that episode and then one other one. I can't remember the other one. It was so long ago. But it was a cool time.
There were a couple good episodes in there. Not most were bad, but there was a couple good ones. It definitely was not as good as Masters of Horror.
Oh God, no. No. But that's so funny. I can't believe I've never told you this before.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. So I again, what I was getting at. Sorry for the tangent, but actually that was a fun one. We love this industry, but as Trev knows, I've said this multiple times in our group thread. It might be the dumbest industry on planet Earth. This industry makes the worst decisions it possibly can at every single time, and they never learn from their mistakes either. Like this rush to streaming, throwing things exclusively on the platform. It sounds good from the top, but as we're seeing 2 to 3 years later, as everybody rushed to try to beat Netflix, it's been an abomination. Like box office grosses are at an all-time low. This summer was a disaster. People are waiting. You have trained the audience to wait. This was a big thing. When this was all happening, we would spend hours discussing during our quarantine movie nights. We'd discuss the industry of what was going on because it was an exciting, weird time, obviously. And, you know, once you train the consumer to wait, when you tell them, hey, for only, at the time, $7 a month, you can sit on your couch and watch Black Widow, then people are going to do that. You know, very rarely are people going to go out and rush out to Barbie and Oppenheimer. That is the exception to the rule. But now this industry is in this weird crossroads, and we'll talk about the strikes as well. Like, we're in the midst of 2 strikes right now, actors and writers, and it's a mess. Nobody's getting paid. People are getting overworked. Like Artemis Fowl, product is being ripped from the streaming services. Like you said, either to sell later, or if it's a tax write-off, like something like Batgirl, that can never be shown ever again. This is the whole idea. If you claim on your taxes that it's a write-off, it's being deleted from history, it is not possible to release that. You will face serious inquisition from the tax people. So Batgirl's gone. You know, Artemis Fowl, who knows what the reason was, but this could potentially be gone forever. And that is such a wild thing. I texted Trev today that finally they're releasing, when they say releasing, they might release maybe 100 copies of WandaVision is getting a Blu-ray release. You know, The Mandalorian season 1 and 2 are getting a Blu-ray release. But what does that mean anymore? What is a Blu-ray release anymore, Trev? Is it 50 Blu-rays across Western Canada? Like, it's crazy.
Well, and you even wonder, is that really is that any kind of sign of really like any upswing in physical media, or is that just an industry and a studio right now in the midst of a strike, desperate to get any profit they can?
Totally.
Say like, well, I guess we need to, maybe we can at least get some profit off of selling some physical copies of this right now. So, yeah, I don't know, like what you were just talking about, this whole, you know, the streaming apocalypse and training people to wait and, you know, all that. That's just the next step in what has been over the last couple decades, I think, like a slow de-evolution of this industry. Mm-hmm. And this whole conversation, why we want to do it, came for me out of a recent discussion we were having in the same text thread you were talking about, where I brought up something and I was really curious to see how everyone was going to react. And you zoomed right in and said you agreed. And I was like, okay, I'm not the only one. Where I said, you know, and I can't remember my exact verbiage, but I said something along the lines of, you know, it's really weird. I'm a huge fan of movies and TV. I've grown up loving this stuff. I love it enough to want to do a podcast about it. That's my hobby. That's my passion, is just sitting down and watching movies and talking about movies. But right now, I kind of like it. There's a real sour feeling being into like movies and TV. It's not really that much fun anymore because of all this stuff we talked about. You mentioned the strikes, because of learning more and more about how horrible the people who make the stuff I love are being treated, how they're not being paid what they deserve, how they're putting all this work into creating product and it's just getting ripped off, you know, these services and going away. And yeah, it's like, it sucks to be a fan right now, honestly, not just because the content is bad, which it mostly is, but because it's hard to feel good about being a fan of an industry that is, you know, only rewarding the top 1% in these studios, and everyone else is fighting for survival and getting dicked over at every moment, and the industry heading in all the wrong directions, like you said. It's like, it's more like frustrating and miserable to be a fan of movies and TV nowadays.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's not like this is not new. Like, listeners, we know Hollywood is a cruel, evil, sadistic place.
We saw Babylon.
Yeah. There you go. And we just talked about Harvey Weinstein. Like, there's so much bad that has been in Hollywood for decades and decades. So that's not what we're not like some epiphany. Like, oh my God, Hollywood is mean, right? Mm-hmm. It's the fact that it is so brazenly mean now. It's almost like when Bob Iger came back to Disney, people thought, oh, he's the savior. He's coming back, and he's on the sides of the creatives. That was the whole idea. Bob Chapek, that was running Disney after him, was on the side of the business. He was not the creatives did not like him. So when Bob Iger came back, people were like, oh, wow, you know, he's going to be on our side. And then he's at this billionaire brunch, you know, right on MSNBC, and he's the guy to say, buck up, fuck you guys. Yeah. You know, the studios are going to win this. get back to work. And it's like, if that guy did that,
brunch where they're like eating $100 bills, and he's like doing an interview where I think correct me, this might be a direct quote where he said, "I know the writers are asking for just like a pot to piss in, but I think they can just go in their pants." I think that's exactly what he said.
Wow. Yeah.
Speaking of content, we're in the midst of a writer's strike, and very likely it would seem to have a actors strike. How is that going to impact things, and what are your expectations there?
Well, I think it's very disturbing to me. We've talked about disruptive forces on this business and all the challenges that we're facing and the recovery from COVID, which is ongoing. It's not completely back. This is the worst time in the world to add to that disruption. I understand any labor organization's desire to work on the behalf of its members to get the most compensation, to be compensated fairly based on the value that they deliver. We managed as an industry to negotiate a very good deal with the Directors Guild that reflects the value that the directors contribute to this great business. We wanted to do the same thing with the writers, and we'd like to do the same thing with the actors. There's a level of expectation that they have that is just not realistic, and they are adding to a set of challenges that this business is already facing that is, quite frankly, very disruptive.
So they're not being
and
realistic?
dangerous. No, they're not.
Why not?
I can't answer that question. I respect their right and their desire to get as much as they possibly can in compensation for their people. I completely respect that. I've been around long enough to understand that dynamic and to appreciate it. But you also have to be realistic about the business environment and what this business can deliver. It is and has been a great business for all of these people, and it will continue to be, even through disruptive times. But, being realistic is imperative here.
What do you do in the interim then? Does AI start to write a lot of scripts?
It will have a very, very damaging effect on the whole business, and unfortunately,
the strike will.
There's huge collateral damage in the industry to people who are, who are support services. I could go on and on. It will affect the economy of, different regions even because of just the sheer size of the business. It's a shame. It is really a shame.
Yeah, I think that when Bob Iger talks about what a shame it is, he needs to remember that in 1980, CEOs like him made 30 times what their lowest worker was making. Now Bob Iger makes 400 times what his lowest worker is.
That's what I mean by the brazenly evil grossness, and that's why it just rips that fun that you're talking about. Because I've been feeling it. Like, we're gonna talk, later on in the episode, just like what we've been watching and stuff we might recommend, or just that sort of thing. And I've been kind of, I don't know about actively not watching things. That's not what I mean. But I guess I just don't really, my passion is very, very low right now. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just there's no joy right now. There's great stuff that is in the theater. Don't get me wrong. We're going to talk about it. Now, I did already mention Barbie and Oppenheimer. Both bangers. I get it. But again, those are the exception to the rule. Everything right now just seems so gloomy and with really no end in sight, Yeah. That's the problem.
Well, yeah, like Barbenheimer is a great example when you say, like, well, that's the exception to the rule. Like, one of those is the product of a director who's been grandfathered into still being allowed to make movies on film and make the kind of movies he wants. But he's like the last of like maybe 5 directors like that, and we're not going to see it again. And the other movie is like some kind of bizarre miracle right now. Like, Barbie is like the antithesis of everything we're talking about. But guess what? They're going to take all the wrong lessons from that movie.
Oh, yes.
And we've already seen that, like, already starting to develop. That movie is not going to signal any great revolution in what we're discussing. Instead, they're going to say, like, I guess this means people want more movies about toys, and like that's, and they're not going to say, oh, you know what this means is we should get more, really talented indie directors and let them go wild with an IP. No, that's not going to be the lesson they take from this. So it doesn't, the success is great. I'm happy to see Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie get this huge hit for a fantastic movie, but ultimately it's going to be like a blip in the problem we're discussing.
But it's even the audience, though. They're trained. I have people that are close to me that loved Barbie, but also felt, they were like to me, you know what I really wanted, though? The scene where Barbie's like running around the Mattel headquarters? I really wanted them to like open up doors to different levels and like, oh, there's like the Hot Wheels in here, and then there's this in there and this in there. And I'm like, oh man, that is the last thing that I wanted,
I wanted them to be given a card that says GI Joe at the end.
Oh my god. Yeah. Oh my god.
I'll give you like a different example of that, like a lesser example, but still exactly what we're talking about in terms of how people are trained. Talking to my brother, he really loved Barbie too, and then we're talking about it, and the first thing he says is, "Do you think they're going to do a sequel?"
First thing.
It's like, oh god, like I hope not. It's like not everything that movie does not call for a sequel in any way. Wouldn't it be great if it was just its singular thing? But I guarantee you right now, there's a whole division at Warner Brothers built around trying to convince Greta Gerwig to do a sequel or just plow ahead without her, and who else can they get to do it,
It's the what's next mentality. Nowadays things just can't be made and exist
what's next
and be
when
awesome.
Exactly will we release it?
Totally. Like, you know what? It's funny we say that, because years ago, remember us getting in an argument about, we never get in arguments, but like when we got in an argument about like DC or Marvel waiting too long, I used to be on the side of like, yeah, they gotta come out now. They gotta come up now. And as I've grown, watching the industry do that and shovel out a bunch of shit to me, no, things are ready when they're ready. And if that takes 5 years, if it takes 7 years, whatever, but people, the consumer has changed, and convenience is king. I've always said this to you. When we talked about anything, when we talked about all these streaming services popping up, I always said convenience is king, and people will jump onto the pirate ship because it's just hard to manage different streaming services. For me and you, we kind of get where we'll find things for the most part, but the average person is not me and you. The average person are my parents. And they're the ones that are like, oh, if it's not on Disney Plus, we're not going to watch it. If it's not on Netflix, we're not going to watch it. That's just how it works. So convenience is king, and costs. Everything is going up. I know Disney I think they just announced that they're upping their charges again. When it first debuted, it was like $7 a month, and I think it's going to be like around 15 now. And to double in price in only 3 years is insanity.
While you're removing product.
Yeah,
and
totally.
By most accounts, your product is getting worse.
Yes.
Like you have like the general consensus of the recent Marvel shows and of the recent season of The Mandalorian. And things like this, people are like, this stuff is not good anymore. You started off kind of hot, and now this is becoming garbage.
It's all just really depressing. I mean, I hate to be such a bummer on this episode. Artemis Fowl was definitely going to brighten our spirits if we watched it, but it's a really frustrating, weird time. And even things like this, like Across the Spider-Verse comes out and it's beloved, right? Everybody loves it, and then they have to announce that, oh, by the way, we worked our animators to the bone, and didn't pay them. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like we just can't have nice things. We just can't. It's impossible. We can't even have something that's just a marvelous movie that everybody loves, and in the back of our minds, it was basically a sweatshop. It's crazy.
Yeah, so that's the other thing. Like you said, you're dead right in that we are aware this has always been like an awful industry, and it's weird to say like, well, maybe we liked it more because before these problems were more swept under the rug. But I do honestly think the problems have gotten worse.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's just more blatant, and a big part of that is this necessity to feed this content trough that has just developed with all these streaming services. I don't have it in front of me. I wish I had saved it when I saw it. I regret that I didn't. But I saw some like chart that showed the overall profit of each of the major studios over the last few decades. And it basically showed that every major studio was pretty much consistently making a profit every year until like the streaming wave really hit. And like once Netflix got the streaming revolution going, and especially when every other studio has started their own streaming services, since that point, every year, every studio is in like they're losing money. So it's like we are now at the point where we can officially say, for all the convenience of Netflix, and don't get us wrong, I think Chris and I will say like there are things we like about streaming, of course. Like we're not immune to this convenience thing, but it is now safe to say that what Netflix started, this streaming revolution, did effectively destroy this industry in a major way, not just because of having to feed this constant content, but also because it did change the theatrical market in a really negative way. That's another big part for us, is, and this, like, I harp on this a lot because I'm not as into, I'm not even as into blockbusters as Chris, but I don't even think you're like not the worst example of this, but like, I want like a really more robust selection of films to see at the theater.
Yeah.
But what happened with the streaming revolution, of course, and again, we're not saying anything people don't already know, but with streaming, because people were like, well, I can just wait to watch that at home, suddenly studios were saying, well, if people are going to only want to watch smaller movies at home then. So the only thing that people go to see in the theater is like the big spectacle ones where it feels like you should see on a big screen. And so every studio basically said, we're only doing those now. What is our biggest IP? We'll just make those. And all the cool, smaller, mid-budget movies that I used to love throughout the 90s and early 2000s, those just got moved to streaming only. And then really not even on streaming, right? Because that they weren't profitable enough on streaming. So they said, forget these $30 million and $40 million movies in general. Everything's got to be either 200 and above million or 1 million. And that's kind of it. You know, and so yeah, like I don't even get the kind of selection of movies I used to get. You know, like Jesus Christ, I don't. This is like just a weird example that popped in my head. This isn't even a movie I like, but like I would kill for something like The General's Daughter to come out today. You know, just like a studio movie with a star in it that's like a mid-budget little thriller that's not meant to be like full of explosions and spectacle. It's just like a nice adult thriller movie with like with one celebrity in it, and like we barely can get that now.
Yeah. Like I used to work at the movie theater, you know, back in the mid aughts, and you know, at the multiplex we had 14 or 15 screens if I remember correctly, and every screen was a different movie. You know, like there were 10 to 15 different films playing at one time. You know, of course, when you know the Revenge of the Siths come out or the Spider-Man 2s come out, of course they get a few more, and the studios pay for that. But now Disney or these bigger conglomerates are buying out these theaters and these screens for months, you know? Yeah. Hell, that's what's happening even with, you know, we propped up Mission Impossible 7 and we propped up Oppenheimer, but that was a battle of premium screens in the last couple weeks. You know, Tom Cruise fought for the IMAX screens and they decided to go with Nolan for Oppenheimer, and Oppenheimer's cleaning up, and guess what? Mission Impossible 7 is bombing. It bombed. We'll just say it that. Nobody else wants to say it. Me and Travis have talked about this privately too. But that's a movie where an inflated budget, either because of COVID, starts and stops, or just because everybody has lost their goddamn minds when it comes to making films. You talked about profit. These movies aren't being profitable because they're just spending too much. Yeah. They're just spending so much. You know, what is it? Indiana Jones was at $330 million it was made for. Indiana Jones? I think it's going to lose like $150 million. Yeah. And it made okay money back in normal times, but there's no leash anymore. Everybody has lost it.
Like you look at like a movie like that, it's like a lot of people wouldn't saw that movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like
doesn't matter.
And it's still a bomb. Like, and that's a problem.
You talked about mid-level budgets with one recognizable star. Well, No Hard Feelings came out, the Jennifer Lawrence raunchy rom-com. I did wait for that to go to streaming to watch it. Even myself, Mr. Go to the Theater, I did wait for that one. And that movie made, I think, $80 to $90 million, which back in the day sounds great. That's pretty good. But the movie cost $50 million. To spend 50 and to make money, you have to 2.5 times that. These movies are bombing. It's ridiculous. And like, what's the wake up call? Is it this? Is it that literally the industry is on the brink of complete destruction? Like, is that what it takes to people to rein in their budgets? I really don't understand it. I don't understand.
That is the answer. We might be close to that, but I mean, and I just want to bring up one other point because I mentioned, and just to kind of keep compounding the problems we're talking about. Sure. I mentioned how this changing market, you know, changes because you made a great point about like the studios buying up these screens. If you remember a while back, there was like a feud between Disney and Tarantino because Tarantino wanted The Hateful Eight to play in the Cinerama Dome in LA, you know, because he had filmed it in like you know, this ultra wide screen, and it was kind of made for that. And they were like, well, Disney came in and told the theater like, we need Force Awakens to show in Cinerama Dome, and if you don't take off Hateful Eight, we won't give you any Disney movies anymore. So of course the theater picks, you know, Disney over Tarantino, and so we see that, right? We see these studios like bullying a certain kind of movie out of the marketplace. But then, like I said, like the recourse to that, at least for a while, was thinking, okay, well, this sucks. We're only going to get these big blockbusters in theaters, but at least the smaller, kind of more adult-oriented, dramas and mid-budget thrillers and things like that, they'll move to streaming exclusives. Okay, fine. I can maybe live with that. The problem is suddenly every studio needs a streaming service. There's not only 2 or 3 streaming services. There's 10 or 12 or 20. And so because they want to compete with each other now, you don't compete with a small, $20 million interesting drama. You compete with your own blockbusters. So now you have streaming services making streaming exclusive blockbusters, movies like The Tomorrow War and The Gray Man and whatever that Gal Gadot movie is now. These are movies that like should be in the theater probably, but the streaming services are just like, no. We're like, that's the kind of movie we're making now as our exclusives even. So there's like no place anymore for the smaller movies I'm talking about. And that's like the bigger bummer. So yeah, you're just seeing an entire kind of movie that used to be like a really significant part of the box office just wiped away and like taken out of existence.
And these movies are being dumped on streaming. This is one thing we really have to hammer home. It's not just that these companies are making their own content and throwing it on there so there's an avenue or a spot to go seek them out. Guys, these networks or these streaming services aren't even marketing these things. Like something will premiere and it's maybe in the what's hot or top 10 things in Canada right now. And that's all you see. These major movies. I've been on Netflix the last couple days. And like you said, that Gal Gadot movie's out. And I have seen nothing for it. It's not on my main screen. It's not on the banner. It's not, hey, check this out. You need to stumble across it. You still need to find it.
I had that with a smaller movie, but one I wanted to see. And I recently watched Hidden Strike, the Jackie Chan, John Cena movie that like I'd heard about years ago because it was finished years ago and then sat on the shelf. And I heard like, oh, it's finally going to get released on Netflix. I'm like, okay, it's probably not going to be that great, but I want to check it out. And then like I kind of forgot all about it. And then one day just randomly someone on Twitter mentioned that, yeah, it's on Netflix. And I was like, all right, go and check Netflix. Doesn't come up on my main screen, not in the top 10. I look up Jackie Chan, not one of the first like 3 results. You had to like search for that movie, and it's like, and then I actually ended up enjoying it. But I like that's the thing, like that's a new Jackie Chan movie on Netflix, and it's just like buried. And like that's even like that's what my algorithm. You think my algorithm would be like, we know that's your favorite movie star of all time. Maybe we'll pump this out for you. But
dude, it's like the Arnold show. The Arnold show, whatever. I don't even know the name of it, and I watched it. Which maybe shows you what it is. It's fluff. But even Arnold had a TV show on Netflix. Had a 9-episode or whatever TV show. His return his only foray into TV, and it just was released and forgotten about. Crazy.
One thing you and I have talked a lot about in this podcast, because we've done like a lot of 80s and 90s movies that have these like surprising kind of second lives or cults, like a Buckaroo Banzai or Flash Gordon, and especially with the 80s ones. I'll often, because I older than you, I grew up in the 80s, and I'll explain to you about how like the reason movies like that and some of my favorite movies, like my generation is in love with certain movies like the Goonies or Clue, the Burbs and things like this. And it's because, and as I've told you, it's because when we were growing up, they were on cable all the time. You got home after school or you hung out with your friends on the weekend. You were like, what are we going to do? I don't know. Let's throw on a movie. You'd throw on HBO, Cinemax Showtime, and chances were pretty good The Last Dragon was going to be on or Big Trouble in Little China. And so we grew up seeing these movies over and over and over again. And that's how they became hits, And now, like you said, these movies debut on streaming and they instantly disappear from the ether. Like, so first of all, there's 2 parts to this. We just have to admit, it's 100% true that a streaming movie just is not going to have the same cultural impact or longevity as a theatrical release, no matter what. Even if that theatrical release is a bomb.
Yeah.
I'll give you like an example, right? Like a movie I just saw, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, that new Dracula boat movie, right? It's bombing, bad.
First of all, I love that log line. The Dracula boat movie. Oh, yes, that one.
A big meme became that they should have just called it Boat Dracula, which would have been kind of great. But no, that movie's bombing bad, right? But it's still going to be remembered. Now, this is maybe a little unfair because it's a Dracula movie, so horror fandom will always remember, and will always check out any Dracula movie even into the future.
Right.
But my point is, it's going to be remembered more because even though it's not performing, it still had like months of theatrical trailers. You'd go to the theater and see the posters. A movie that goes to theaters gets more like clout and it gets more entrance into the public zeitgeist. These streaming movies don't get that. They don't bother promoting them. They just suddenly throw them up one day, and by the next week, they've already moved them 50 places down into their algorithm. So they just have no longevity. But the other thing you mentioned is true too, is just like they're so buried in the streaming service. And this is what baffles my mind, because this is such an easy fix. I always think, like, with Netflix, like, we'll just use them as the ultimate example, right?
Sure.
Why not just have a thing where every week, because they have the top 10, what's popular right now, but why not for all these, like, Netflix originals that are already forgotten, you know, your Spectrals, your Apostle, your The Perfection, that instead of letting those just completely fall out of everyone's memory, why not have a part right on the home screen every week that's, like, features some of the past classics, you know? And just say, like, hey, don't forget about these, you know, and highlight something different every week and be like, this is the movie of the week. This is the classic Netflix film of the week or something. Every streaming service could do that. They choose not to because they're so obsessed with the idea of always chasing the new subscribers by just throwing more new content at you that nothing has a chance to take a hold. And for me, the ultimate example of that is, did you know, Chris, that not too long ago there was a sequel to the massive, giant theatrical box office hit Knives Out?
Yeah, right.
Like a Netflix sequel to that with a killer cast again, Daniel Craig returning, Rian Johnson writing and directing again, got Oscar nominations. That movie has completely memory hold already. Glass Onion. Like, it just did not have any of the same impact that Knives Out did because it didn't play in theaters, didn't have like months of people talking about its theatrical success, didn't have months of theatrical trailers. Instead, it was on Netflix one weekend. A lot of people watched it, and then by the next week, everyone had moved on to the next thing.
We both know people in our circles that adored the first one, and they have still not watched the sequel. The sequel that was released around Christmas of 2022. It is now end of August 2023, and it still has not been watched by these people. And it's like, that's not even a commentary on them. It's a commentary, what you're saying, on the industry about, you know, Netflix can spend, what is it, $500 million to get two Knives Out sequels out of Rian Johnson. One gets dropped with one of the greatest casts of all time. And like you said, that can't even be the draw. That's not even the draw. It's just on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. And that should have been an event. You know, like this is the thing. You're so right that streaming services are incapable of making an event. As much as they think they can. This is one thing. So, like, things will hit like The Mandalorian. Okay, Stranger Things. These things do hit. There's no doubting that they hit, but they hit in the moment, and then it's done. Yep. The Mandalorian hit, and it was this crazy thing for the 1 month that it was airing, and then everybody forgot it for a year. Okay, second season comes out. The only thing people want to talk about is CGI Luke Skywalker. Okay, then the third season comes out, and everybody hates the show now. So what happened? Oh, it's because nobody actually cared about the show. You know, it doesn't have this staying power. You know, I'm so happy to hear from, I guess, the Broccoli's who make James Bond, how stringent they've been on saying, hey, we are going to make theatrical films and debuts for our James Bond characters. And listeners, you may remember, and if you don't, and if you're a newcomer here, go back and listen to one of our Success to series. It was a spinoff of, or it is a spinoff of franchises that we hold near and dear. Right, it's a little bit more positive than this episode is.
Let's just say that. Also, if you're a newcomer and you've made it this far just listening to us bitch, kudos.
yes, thank you. But that we talk about how, you know, there was a time where the final curtain call for Daniel Craig was almost gonna go to streaming, or there was talk about it, right? Mm-hmm. Like there was a bidding war actually behind the scenes to get it onto a streaming service, and thankfully it didn't, because could you imagine the finale to one of our great James Bonds in the depths of Netflix, just like Glass Onion? It makes no sense. They are desperately chasing this eventized nature of things, but it doesn't have the staying power. You know, this summer has 3 big hits: Mario, Oppenheimer, and Barbie. And those 3 movies did become events for one reason or another, and will stand the test of time in some way, shape, or form. But it's gonna be hard to reproduce. That's a big one too. It's gonna be really hard to reproduce Barbenheimer. It may take another decade if theaters are around.
You don't think Saw Patrol is going to do it?
Oh, see, like there you go. Like this is what it is. It's studios already are trying to they're learning the wrong lessons, right? What Trev is talking about is we both found a tweet from I think Paramount, and that movie comes out the same time as Saw X does, Saw 10, and they're already trying to get a hashtag going. And guys, that's not how viral marketing works. Okay,
right. And also like Barbenheimer worked because they're both like targeted at film, like people who are into film, people who love like a certain kind of cinema. Nobody who wants to see Saw is going to go see Paw Patrol just for a meme.
Exactly. But this industry is a weird one, man. Like it's frustrating because they have trained the audience, they've cheapened the experience, and they're delivering poor product. And it's been going on for too long.
And now we should mention the other element of it, because you mentioned the strikes. So on
Yes.
top of all that, there's also the fact that the product we do love, because we still do love a lot of the product, and we get that there are people fighting to make good stuff still, they're being paid in like pretzels, and like pretzels and leftover stationery that the studio doesn't want anymore. So you have these, and I should say, I think I speak for both of us, we support both strikes. Give these people the money they deserve, the actors and the writers, pay these people, especially when you read the facts. And this is what we mean about it being so brazen now, and how these studios are just so transparently evil. When you read these studies and these reports that say that what is ultimately being asked for, the studios could easily pay that by just docking like one, executive's pay like 20% or something.
Yeah.
And they're just like, no, we're not going to do it. We're going to wait. We're going to try and wait you out. And it's like, really? Like, when it's so clear, like, right? They even at this point they know they look evil.
Oh yeah.
They just don't care.
But Trev, yeah, they don't care because they're gonna win. Like this is what I hate to sound so gross about it and like nihilistic, but they hold all the cards. They do, and they've been planning. This trajectory for a long time. Like this AI thing is not new. We're just talking about it more, but they've been laying the groundwork for this for a long time. De-aging people, scanning them as they have been, manipulating performances, getting dead actors permissions from their families to recreate them. This has always been the plan. Do I think actors will be completely replaced? No, I don't think so. But I think that they do hold the cards in a lot of ways, especially on the B and the C tier. Like, are they going to replace Leo DiCaprio? No. But those thousands and thousands of extras that are supposed to be in that crowd? Well, guess what? They own all those people's likenesses. And they didn't even know it.
When I started doing film and TV, I went in and started doing background. And one of the things they spoke about was that they were going to pay a background actor for 1 day work and then use their likeness in perpetuity, like forever, without paying them. And I'm like, that is not okay. Like most background actors, like they are professional background actors. That is their job. And for you to take that away from them, that's crazy. So it's not just about, like the actors. I know there's been a lot of talk of like, oh, actors already make a lot of money. It's like, no, it's about like everybody.
So that's the problem here. Like there was a story that came out that Disney was bringing in extras, I think on the WandaVision set, and bringing them to a trailer to be scanned, their full body, and then they have to signing their likenesses away to be put into extra scenes later on. That is, it's gross. and again, these are these stories that the trades are allowing. You know what I mean? Like the studios are allowing the trades to hear these things, which means what the fuck else is going on?
Or like a different, like not an AI one, but like an upcoming horror movie that I'm kind of excited about, The Nun 2, right? Like I like The Nun. It's a bad but fun movie.
Yeah, same.
So I'm like down for the sequel. I think it looks like it'll be the same kind of movie, and I'll probably enjoy it, even though it won't be great. But like I want to be excited for it. And then a story comes out that as we're preparing to see The Nun 2, we're getting all excited. Oh, Nun 2 is coming. All right. Oh, the woman who plays the nun is suing Warner Brothers because they haven't given her diddly squat for playing the nun. Like she had a thing in her contract that states she should be given a percentage of the merchandise sales. She looks around, easy to do. She has Google. She probably just looks up nun merchandise, sees, wow, there's a lot of stuff with my face on it. I haven't been paid that much. She asked them to send her an itemized list of what merchandise she's getting a profit for. They send her a list, and she says like the list has like 8 things on it, and she's like, wait a minute, I can do a simple search and find way more merchandise. So you always talk about this Hollywood accounting. There you go, right? And that's that's the star of a franchise that has a movie about to come out, and she's willing to sue the studio. That's a pretty big deal. That's showing that all these actors have like had it to a certain degree, but it's also just showing like it's now that blatant where it's just like the studios are like, yeah, we're fucking these people over, like whatever, who cares? You know, we you know what? She's still gonna do the Nun 3 because we have her by the balls. So,
do you honestly like level with me here, as we're both just kind of depressingly talking about everything? Like, do you see a light at the end of the tunnel here? Do we go back? Like, do we go back to what it was, you know, pre-MCU days? Like, what happens? What happens? Do they just continue just pour out CGI nonsense forever because that's what all the AI tools are making? I don't know.
Do you want me to try and be positive for a second and maybe make you feel a little bit better?
Yes,
because
please.
Here's what I do see is like because I kind of agree with you that it's obviously all heading in a bad direction. It's depressing. We're like bummed right now. You know, we have franchise fatigue for sure. Definitely have superhero fatigue. Basically everything fatigue. But if there's a light at the end of the tunnel, I do honestly think there's a possibility that what we should be rooting for, because you mentioned, are we just about to see the industry on the verge of collapse? I think that's actually needed and necessary right now, and might be a good thing, because the last time this happened, the last time the studios got so full of themselves and made a bunch of like over budget bombs and like nearly destroyed the industry, that's what led into like the big explosion and heyday of like the 60s and 70s, where suddenly we got more auteur driven product, and like, you know, directors like your Scorsese's, your Bogdanovich's, your Francis Ford Coppola's, your Bob Rafelson's, all these people rise up and say, hey, we're going to make these kind of smaller movies that actually get the zeitgeist. So is there a possibility that that could happen again? That's what I hope. Now, I don't think the circumstances are exactly the same. It's going to be a harder fight, but I think there is... I want to be somewhat optimistic here. I don't want to just be awful this whole episode. And I want to say maybe the end result is within the few years, there's a couple more Indiana Jones and what are some other like gigantic flashes, you know, that completely cripple the studios to the point where someone finally says, let's try something different, and we start to see maybe a rise of like those smaller films again. And even if that just happens on streaming first and then starts to migrate to theaters or whatever, that's at least one possibility. I'm not super optimistic, but I'd like to think maybe that's where we're heading.
Maybe just you know what they should just do? They should just make horror movies forever, because they seem to be the only movies that are profitable.
For Boat Dracula.
Yeah, and the Haunted Mansion. Fuck. Well, it's not doing that well either. But these low to mid budget horror films seem to be doing pretty damn well. You know, the Blumhouses of the world, and they have their budgets managed. It's not blank checks. It's a strange one. Like, I just recently watched the newest Insidious. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but it made a decent amount of money. You know,
highest grossing horror movie of the year.
Crazy. So it's like these horror films are consistently hitting, and I think it is a communal experience that people do enjoy. People do like to go. People like to get scared of all ages. People do, and they like to do it, you know, in a theater landscape, because it's kind of, everybody gets nervous at the same time. You know, it's very much a communal experience for horror. Comedy has not been great at that, but
I'll tell you the big difference there is that horror is less, it by its very nature, it gets to be less star driven too. Talk to Me, it doesn't have to have any big stars in it. People just have to go, oh, that's the movie where people hold a hand and then ghosts show up. You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
Horror has always been, in fact, horror is arguably better when it doesn't have stars in it, because it's easier to get lost in the movie and be scared for someone if you don't go, oh, that's Brad Pitt, he's not going to die.
Totally.
So,
you're right.
So horror benefits from not having to have big stars in it, which is a big part of it. I think why its budgets can stay low too.
I think that's the biggest step, though. The budgets need to go down.
Yes.
There's no need. Like,
I mean, that's the first, like, the biggest like easy fix right now would be, hey, let's go back to making movies that are like 125 million, you know, instead of 200, 300 million.
Yeah.
And even 125, some movies don't need to be that even. So
yeah, like Artemis Fowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay, let's talk about let's leave on a little bit of a good note. Like, what is something that you have been watching that you want to maybe recommend? What do you think? It could be new, it could be old. It doesn't really matter. what's been on your watch list here?
I mean, yeah. So like, where my positivity has been coming from lately, it just wrapped up is Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. So as a lifelong Star Trek fan, recent newer Trek has been hit and miss. Yep. But I've been very happy that in the last year I got the third season of Picard, which was, I never even watched the first two seasons because I heard nothing but bad things, but I decided to give the nostalgia-driven third season a shot, and I loved it. It was great. And then I've loved both seasons of Strange New Worlds, which is a kind of return to the classic episodic version of Trek. They're taking some really wild swings now. In the second season where they were just like, let's really take advantage of this format and see how crazy we can get. I love it. It's just a show that makes me happy. But again, it's on a streaming service that's siphoning money by the second. Who knows what will happen in the future? They've already taken one. Guess what? There's already one new Star Trek show that they've completely removed from the streaming service that is searching for a new home. So Trek is not immune to these problems either. But yeah, that's been the thing I've loved the most. But if I can just, like, other movies that I've seen recently, like I said, I did enjoy Last Voyage of the Demeter, even though it bombed. I liked it. It's actually a movie that I didn't think we would ever do on the show, but surprisingly enough, it did end on a sequel tease, so we will. And actually, I hated that. I didn't like the ending at all. Yeah. But liked it otherwise. I also give a shout out to the Meg 2 in terms of like these kind of, we talk about like these smaller franchises that's like another odd man out at the moment where they're not making them for that much money. So it's being able to turn a profit primarily through international. But I thought the Meg 2 was really fun in a way that the first one was unfortunately not. So I liked this one a lot better. Yeah. So yeah, those are some quick shout outs of recent things I've watched. Cool.
Yeah, the Stranger New Worlds thing is Trev got me onto that show last year when it premiered, and
because you're not a Trek guy, or like not like just movies, right? You've only seen the movies.
I've only seen the movies. I've never was into TNG or anything. I've liked and appreciated and disliked the movies. Like I'm the full range of the films.
Oh yeah, me too.
But Trev sold me on it. And it's great. It's awesome. And of course, it's all on, as of today, I think they might be all taken off of Crave in Canada. So all Star Trek content is, I think, moving from Crave / HBO to, I think, Paramount Plus. So I have to get Paramount Plus now to watch that. It's such a pain in the ass. But that is great. So I second that with Trev. As I said, I watched that No Hard Feelings with Jennifer Lawrence. That was enjoyable. Is it gonna blow you away? No. Are you gonna walk away thinking it's one of our great comedies? No. But you know what? That Jennifer Lawrence, she's fearless. She's a fearless actress, and it's interesting to think back on her filmography and realize that she's wasted a lot of her career not doing comedies. She is very, very funny. She's
also. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, she's just so charming. Like that's what I think. She's just so spectacular in that sense.
I'm glad you said that because I was about to say she's also wasted a lot of her time, and this isn't fair. This isn't on her, but she's wasted a lot of her time having to fight and deal with criticism that she never deserved. She reminds me a lot of like I think like today's version of that is like Brie Larson, right? Where Brie Larson is, I haven't loved every Brie Larson movie, but she said a couple things that unfortunately people have really overly fixated on and took the wrong way. And she's just gotten so much undeserved hate when like you kind of follow it. She actually seems like she's just kind of a fun, sarcastic person. Yeah. And like Jennifer Lawrence definitely like that too. Like people just turned on her so much at a certain point, maybe because of how quickly she rose up the ranks and got that Oscar and everything. But she's always been awesome and she's always been fun. So what's the problem?
Oh yeah, and she's really good in that movie. I liked her quite a bit. And there's like I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a scene in there that you're just like, wow, fearless. Just that's how I'll say it. Another one, I haven't been watching a lot, to be totally honest with you, Trev, but I will commiserate on something that we both enjoyed. Glitch, the rise and fall of HQ trivia. Yeah. Listeners, if you remember back in 2018, before the dark times, there was that HQ trivia that popped up, and then everybody in the world just seemed to be glued to their phones, every 20 or for a 20-minute span every day. That was a fun time, and I've never really known what happened to that game. I remember me and you were really obsessed with it. We loved it. We especially loved the host, and we thought he was built for something better, and he deserved to be a star. Yeah. And we just kind of fell off, like I think everybody did. But to hear what went wrong in the beginnings, middle, and end of that app was quite interesting. Way more interesting than I ever thought. So
fascinating.
Yeah. Fascinating, yeah. So I don't want to spoil anything, but I would say check out Glitch: The Rise and Fall of HQ Trivia. I really liked that one. I really did.
I'll just throw out 2 more quick shows that I would recommend everyone watch. So you've heard me say this before, and I know like you, I think intend to get into this at some point. But to me, there's no funnier show on TV right now than What We Do in the Shadows, the TV adaptation of the great Taika Waititi movie about the mockumentary about vampires. If you haven't checked out the show, which is on FX, and you can check it out on Hulu streaming, I just think it's the funniest show on TV. It's just like consistently great. They haven't dipped in quality yet, even into their I can't remember if this is the 4th or 5th season right now, but it's fantastic.
Nice.
And then another show that like I was not even sure I was going to try, and I was like, what the hell? I'll give this a whirl. Why not? And I'm surprised at how much I'm loving it. And now we're sending people to these streaming services we just said all deserve to die. But so you can't escape. We can't escape this shit. But okay,
we're shills, aren't we? We really are.
So
we are.
you know that awful streaming service we talked about that removed Batgirl and screwed over all those people. Go to that streaming service and go to Max and give David Zaslav some of your money. And check out My Adventures as Superman, or My Adventures with Superman, the new animated Superman movie. Really, really good. It's got so the animation style is an animation style, but they're really getting to like the heart of Superman and his relationship with Lois. They're pitched like a little younger in this, but still working at the Daily Planet, and it's really fun. Has a lot of soul to it. Jack Quaid is the voice of Superman because that guy apparently has to be in everything now. But yeah, it's really, really fun. I'm really enjoying that.
Trev, I don't know if you did that on purpose to talk about something DC related, but listeners, if you've tuned in this far, thank you. Number one, thank you for being here with us. Yeah. But this does conclude Summer Surprise. Yeah.
What do you think about Artemis Fowl? Recommend it?
I've forgotten about this. In 3 years from now, I'm gonna delete this episode off of our site, our hosting site. Yeah, don't watch it, even if you can. Yeah. But going forward, listeners, we love our themes. We always have a theme. I don't think we'll ever do a movie just randomly unless the randomizer tells us. We spend time...
Or until maybe in like year 9, we'll get to a point where we can't make themes anymore because it's just too random.
We'll make it happen. We'll have to like, tether together, extras or actors or last names.
These two had the same caterer.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. This is they're both dog people in real life. So we are moving into the fall time. Listeners, we talked about DC. There's a lot of problems in the DCEU, but we're going to go into the DC... PU. Oh my God, terrible. So we are doing the running history, really a 30-year-long history. This is a hefty one, listeners. We're going for the 30 years of the DCEU, from the starts of trying something out to the complete disaster that has become. Many reboots, incarnations, but we're starting out September 12th with Supergirl from 1984, going into September 26th with Steel from 1997, October 10th, Superman Returns, 2006, October 24th, Green Lantern, finally getting a Green Lantern, by the way, from 2011, who has a significant spot in our logo.
Yeah.
November 7th, we'll be doing Black Adam. So get ready for us to talk about The Rock again. If you want a little bit of a precursor to that episode, maybe check out the Baywatch episode we did. That was a lot of fun. And then we're culminating the DC... PU with The Flash from this year. So yeah. I never wanted to watch The Flash, never had any interest. It looks like absolute sludge. And Trev said, we got to watch it. So.
Someone's probably saying right now, wait, aren't you, what if there's a Flash sequel? I think we're pretty confident at this point. We don't need to worry about that.
Pretty confident. Yes. Yeah. So, follow along at F2F Pod. That's at F2, the number 2F Pod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. A star rating would be awesome. I like seeing those come in. So, yeah, check out the links in your podcast app to do that. And join the tribe and hit that subscribe. Sorry, we were more or less a bummer on this one, but I think it was apt. I think it was nice to talk about this stuff.
This industry deserves it, quite frankly. You know what? Like this is what they've made us, folks. This is what they've made us. So join us as you do that, as you subscribe to our podcast, as you send us these reviews and everything. Also join us in praying. Yeah, let's just pray. I'm not a very religious man, but let's pray for a resolution to the strikes that gets the actors and the writers what they deserve, not the studios. And then let's just also all join together and hope for the complete explosion of the studio system and a rebirth of a better one. So
yeah. Enough said.
Yeah. Oh, and Chris, there's one more recommendation I actually have for you and like anyone listening who are like readers and particularly like me, love to read books about movies. I think I sent this in our group text thread at one point, and I was like, I'm really excited about this. I'm finally reading it. I'm reading a book right now by Nick DeSemlian called The Last Action Heroes, and it's all about like the action heroes of the 80s and 90s. In particular, he focuses on 8 of them. So it's him telling the whole stories of Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Chuck Norris, Jackie Chan, Dolph Lundgren, Steven Seagal, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Bruce Willis.
Cool.
And it's like him giving the whole history of that time in like America when they like took over the action genre, and it's all, and then getting into like all the feuds they had, how much they were competing with each other, but then also just all the crazy behind the scenes stories of all their films. It's really good, really entertaining. It's funny because I know we did our whole Rocky episode and talked about how much we like love Stallone and how cool he seems. This book actually makes you kind of like be like, this dude is a total asshole. He comes across like one of the worst ones in terms of like how just tough he seemed to work with and how everyone hated working with him. But then it sounds like everyone like loved working with like Schwarzenegger, you know, and he was just like so much more like easy to get along with. But yeah, really fun book. And I know you're like me, you love that time in action cinema. So great book, definitely recommend it.
Cool. Well, it sucks that I don't know how to read.
I was gonna say it also has some pictures.
Oh, then the pop-up?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay.